Thanks for joining me, everyone. Today, I'm going to start out with a prayer of gratitude and then a review of what is energy healing, kind of in a nutshell, what is energy healing, and then a recap of yesterday's session, and then we'll dive into today's session. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being this live webinar, for being all of us together as a coherent healing collective. Thank you for being our ancestors, and through them, the presence of the physical body. Thank you for being the eternal tradition of wisdom that stands as a bridge between the absolute and the relative, ever integrating and expanding our understanding of the relationship between the source of creation and the manifestation. Thank you for blessing our webinar with the ability to work concisely and precisely and cutting right into the heart or the core of this topic and addressing it with the highest and best, most powerful and useful energy healings, empowering everyone in our group to be masterful with this technology themselves. Thank you all so much for being with me. All right. Happy to see everyone here. Happy to have the Europeans with us today. Anyway, so grateful that you're all here. So what is energy healing in a nutshell? For the new people, what is energy healing? Energy healing is a process of focusing attention being consciousness, focusing attention so that it folds back into the field of consciousness in such a way as to promote specific transformations, evolution, and growth. And that process changes the platform or foundation upon which the whole physical manifest level of expression comes forward. So when there's a problem or an illness or a sickness of some kind, the idea is we want to go down to the seed of that. We want to go to the source of it, which is found, hello, that seed or source is found in the field of consciousness itself. And in the field of consciousness, wherever that source or core of that illness sits, it can be affected with attention. Because at the subtle levels of the field, the ocean of consciousness, consciousness is very malleable. It's changing and evolving, at least until you get to the non-changing level of creation, right? But up until then, as it gets finer, 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 there's a lot of fluidity and a lot of flexibility in the field of consciousness. So simply focusing attention can affect changes there. And when the attention is focused in the most intelligent and useful manner, the changes result in an integration of being into the fabric, the manifest fabric of self. And as being, pure unmanifest, unbounded, infinite being integrates into the fabric of self, it brings evolutionary change, it brings completion of incompletions, it promotes form at a consciousness level, which is better aligned with ideal form. And that forms the foundation for the physical manifest level. All right, so that's what energy healing is in a nutshell. We're basically folding consciousness back in on itself in order to promote a more integrated form, essentially. But we need a couple things to do that. We need a map, a navigational map of that ocean of consciousness, the manifest field. And we also, I am providing, to the best of my ability, the explanation or the description of what's happening, because it's useful for the intellect and the mind to have some concepts to hold on to. Otherwise, the whole experience is very abstract, and in its abstraction seems intangible and sometimes chaotic. It's not as useful. It's useful what we're doing. let's see, my son yesterday and I were talking about, we were doing some energy healing work, and I was saying he wants me to use energy healing to do like the impossible, right? He's like, let's test energy healing. Let's do the impossible, right? I know this guy. So I'm like, I can see it. I can see what we're forming on the level of consciousness, but it seems as if its manifestation is going to be like magic. It would just have to be magic to make this happen, or like in a fairy tale or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that centuries ago, some wise person who he had the name, I don't remember the name, said that basically anything that's a high level of technology, high enough level of technology will seem like magic. So it's not that it is magic, it's that we're leveraging the technologies of consciousness in a way that we produce new effects, better, more satisfying effects. All right. What happened yesterday? The name of our energy healing webinar this time around is Relationships and Sexuality. And it could be also called Intimate Relationships and Sexuality, or Romantic Relationships and Sexuality, because we're kind of just focusing in on this one area. As always, Friday night session is more on the theoretical side, and some of the key points from last night were that there's the male and female energies, and this goes for anybody. It doesn't really matter what I mean, I don't say it doesn't matter, but whatever your gender identification or association or sexual preference, these are kind of, we went down to sort of fundamental principles that are useful for people regardless of the differences from one person to another. Okay, so there are naturally male and female energies in creation. I was pointing out yesterday that even some varieties of plants and trees have male and female versions. So it's quite a universal phenomenon that goes beyond just the form of the human physiology. Okay, and that these two energies, when they come together, they're opposites. And when the opposites come together, they create a wholeness. And that wholeness gives rise to optimal condition for manifesting. Optimal condition for manifesting. So, and that means, of course, it's like so optimal for manifesting that even life can be manifested, which is quite amazing when we think about how beautiful that is. All right. So these polarities come together. And another key point from last night was that usually when you get two opposites coming together, we're looking for a way of refining the balance point between them. Because when the balance point is refined and refined and refined and refined like that, at some point or another, we come back to wholeness. But what was really fascinating to me about yesterday's session was that we uncovered together as a collective, because what I'm doing is I'm being the voice of our collective, right? The voice of our healing circle here. So what happened was it became evident that a very, very refined state of balance can mean balance at every point along the spectrum. Balance at every point along the spectrum. So the beautiful daughter who is one of the reasons that this photograph exists. Very, very feminine girl. Very, very kind of at the extreme end, the extreme feminine end of the spectrum. And yet balanced still in that place. Balanced in that space of being very feminine. So that was interesting to note that when the balance becomes fine enough, it's no longer, it's liberated from the linear constraints of the more relative level of our experience, right? So everything does that. As we fathom down into the fine fabrics of consciousness at the really deep level, more and more we find the structure of consciousness is not constrained by boundaries and limitations, space-time, or any kind of boundaries and limitations, including the idea that a balance point has to be a single point. It doesn't have to be. Being can be found at every point in the creation. It can be found at every point in the structure and in the field of expression. So that was very interesting to me. And I didn't know that before we did the webinar last night. That was like a big new piece of information, which I really appreciated. I appreciate you. I appreciated finding that and working with that in terms of the healing work that we did yesterday. We didn't do huge amounts of actual healings yesterday, and I wanted to get to a more practical level today. So a bunch of awesome questions came in, and I'd like to address these now as we're going, kind of use them a little bit as to help as a structure for today's session. Oh, there was one more salient point from yesterday which I would like to bring up before I go into the questions and today's healing session. And that is that ultimately in an ideal relationship, the parties involved are expressing divinity to each other. In other words, the husband is a reflection of the wife's highest divinity, and the wife is a reflection of the husband's highest divinity, like that. So that when he looks at her, he sees the direction of his evolutionary flow. And when she looks at him, she sees the direction of her evolutionary flow. She sees herself at a higher level of expression than where she is in the present. So what's happening, it's like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right? They're the two together are pulling each other up, or partners, any type of partners, doesn't matter gender. They're pulling each other up because they've made a conscious decision to reflect the divinity of the other person back to themselves. So regardless of circumstances or situations, regardless of the types of problems or challenges that arise, and of course we have to have flexibility in our relationships to weather the comings and goings of the influences from the environment, right? But that said, that in each situation, we're reflecting back at a higher level of whatever the experience is.
Like conscious attention, putting your attention on the highest value of the other person, you each do that.
Yes, the question is that like conscious intention? That each person intending to put their attention on the highest value in the other person, that they work together to pull each other up. And yes, absolutely, it's that. And the realization came to me actually back in 1984. I lost a child. That was hard. And at that time, though, that beautiful angelic being had come to me as a very highly evolved soul to help on lots of different levels. And what I realized at that time was that everybody has a choice. We all have choices of what to reflect in other people. So this can be for romantic relationships, but it can be for any relationships. We have a choice of whether we want to reflect the lower energies or the lower qualities, the more challenging, like unsavory aspects of another person back to them, if we want to be the bringer of their bad karma, or if we want to bring the bringer of their good karma. And we have choices. We all have choices. You can't blame the postman. You can't. But the postman has a choice of what types of letters he or she would like to deliver. And so at that time, I remember choosing for myself that I would like to deliver the better news if possible. And what I've come to realize now over the course of time is it's not delivering the letter that has the bad news isn't necessarily a bad thing if it's delivered in a way that, again, reflects the divinity that's contained within that bad news. Because every situation has its pluses and minuses, but the way we interface with that energy is key to our health, our survival, our success, right? So over the time of having energy healing in my life now has been very useful to help me also be able to work with those pieces of karma that are less pleasant in a way which still has an evolutionary effect, which still has an uplifting effect. And that's the That's the letter. That's the piece of karma that's coming through. It's not like you turn a blind eye and go, oh, I'm not going to look at that because that's bad. It's that when you look at it, whatever it is, however we judge it as good or bad, we're taking it from where it is, even if it's fabulous. We're taking it from where it is, and we're just bringing it up to the next level. That's all. It's a very simple procedure, and it's just a single loop that just loops over and over and over again with every experience, with every bite of food, with every thought, with every feeling. That, even though it's not so directly related to relationships as such, that is something that's useful for everyone. It's useful for all of us. So what we're doing is taking that principle, that there's like a template, a blueprint. There's a blueprint for how to take every single, bless you, respond to every single experience down to a very, very fine level and uplift it to the next level. It's a transition. So that's coming, it's being received by everybody in our session today. It's a download and applied. I'm feeling it coming into the physiologies as cellular intelligence. So it's coming down to a very little, very fine level of the physiology. And I feel as if this ties in to some of the work we were doing in yesterday's session, which was related to supporting the body's ability to release microtoxins. We need this, you guys. In this day and age, in this world, we need this. Our people, the people of Earth, need the ability to eliminate microtoxins from our bodies so that everything works better. It's coming into cellular. I'm just feeling it. I'm feeling it coming in. I'm feeling that as impulses of bliss that are moving through the body. Feels as if it's in the physical body, the etheric body, mental and emotional body. So the 4 dense levels of the physiology are receiving this. And it's interesting that I'm experiencing it also activating in the chakra centers of the body. Root chakra, second chakra, third chakra, all the way up like a Christmas tree lighting up. That download, that information, that blueprint that allows every single experience to be processed into its next most uplifted form. We just become like little energizer bunnies or something, just these little beings that's just what we do. We get something, we uplift it, we give it back. We get the next thing, we uplift it, we give it back, like that. It's just nonstop, eternally, eternally, eternally. This, in our healing collective, this as a healing collective is so powerful. We are so powerful. This upgrade for all of our physiologies is radiating out into the collective of our world. Like a light, it's beaming. It's beaming like a bright light, a bright beacon into our world. And it's going into the web of life that's all around all of us. And it's having, interestingly, I would think it would have an illuminating effect. No, it's having a softening effect. It's having a softening effect on our world, on the field of our collective. Great, great. That softening effect is creating something that's like a magnet. It's producing a kind of a state or condition in the web of life, which is attracting in or drawing in more of that energy of the mother of creation, this lovely mothers at home feeling. It's bringing in a sense of feeling safe and comfortable, protected, like that. Mostly feeling safe. And I'm thinking as I'm experiencing this, I'm looking at it, I'm analyzing, and what I'm experiencing is that this feeling of being safe is very, very important in order for us to be able to do the healing works that we need to do in today's healing session. Because the area of sexuality has been riddled with danger. It's been a very dangerous area. One of the reasons that it's considered taboo, one of the reasons that it's avoided in conversation, it's avoided on many levels, is it's a little bit like working with some more intense energy like anger or something, that it's very potent energy, but it has the ability to destroy or to create. That's interesting. So another point from yesterday that I think is important to bring out here is the idea that the sexual energy needs to be handled in such a way that it is able to express, but also in a controlled way, kind of like anger, right? When anger comes up, it means is a need for a change. When anger comes up, there's a need for a change. And so when it comes up, instead of just blasting it all over somebody who's in front of you, what we do is we go in and we say, okay, what needs to be changed? And then let the anger energy be the fuel or the fire that's behind an evolutionary transformation or change. You look for the evolutionary change and then you fuel it with that energy. And as the anger energy shifts to become the fuel, it goes through a refining process. It's like it goes through the filter of intelligence, essentially. And when it does that, it doesn't have a malevolent or destructive effect. It has an effect of making big things happen. It makes big things happen, and big good things happen. So, same with the sexual energy, that when we're able to, so we can use that, and we've worked a lot with anger in previous webinars, right? So we have already a kind of a template going here that allows us to understand how we take an energy that has the potential to go either way. It can either have a destructive or a constructive effect, and work with that energy in order to allow it to maintain its integrity in the long term, right? Which of course is, when we think about sexual energy, that's good, right? Because sexual experience is bliss. So it's nice to be able to maintain bliss in the long term. It's nice to be able to allow it to have its space in our field of perception, but not burn itself out, right? You don't want to burn, that's like anger, exploding to the surface, it burns itself out. But you don't want to burn itself out, but we want to be able to cultivate or hold that energy in such a way that it becomes a very rich fuel for all types of transformation and healing in the body, or anything you want to manifest, including an ideal romantic relationship or a completely fantastic sexual experience or whatever you want to do. Oh, and I didn't say it today, but I should. My disclaimer is that I'm not a super expert on sexuality itself. Like, there's so many people in the market right now who are tantra specialists and specialists in this, that, and the other, and that's not me. My specialty is the energy healing. And so my focus is not to be giving you guys fancy techniques for extra special sexual experiences or something like that. I will let you find those yourself, because everybody's different, right? And everybody has different desires, expectations, etc. So, yes. So the section, so I need to tell you that, as you all know, I keep getting downloads as we're going along on this whole path, our little journey, into this field. So this morning's download is very interesting. What happened was, I have a story to tell. So it happened about 5 years ago. Our family went through a big transition. And just as we were sort of coming into the transition, and it was stressful, it's stressful. We had to move place we'd been 15 years, and there was just a lot of upheaval going on in our family. But I was already an energy healer. I was already like really actively doing energy healing. So at that time, the stress manifested in this body as a lump in my breast. And so that's no good, right? But I went to work on it with energy healing, and it took about 3 months, and it went completely 100% away. And one of the things that I did was I would put my hand chakras and sometimes my fingertip chakras in there. I'd get the energy moving into that area and using dissolving light medicines. I dissolved it. I also used frankincense oil for anybody who's interested. And that was it, basically. I would sit usually at night when I was falling asleep. I would find that little spot that was hard, and I'd put my finger chakras there, get the frankincense oil going, and very, very softly, like a marmotherapist. I don't know, any of you have had marmotherapy. They barely touch, just like that. It's not like a Swedish massage. It's just like barely, barely touching. But when it's barely touching, the energy frequencies could get in and dissolve. When it was completely dissolved, which it did on a number of occasions, it would like completely dissolve and it would come back a little bit, right? Then completely dissolve and come back a little bit like that. But when it was completely dissolved, every time it was dissolved, or even if it dissolved partly, I would send love to that area. And I thank my body for having been so brilliant and being able to get rid of that. And I thank my breasts for being the nurturers and the givers and all that. And, just absolutely fill the area with my love. And that came up from a science experiment that I had read about years earlier, where some rabbits had been infected with cancer. And it was interesting that it turns out that the rabbits who had a keeper that would play with them did so much better. The rabbits who had a keeper that loved them, when they got attention and love, those rabbits didn't get the cancer as bad as the other rabbits. So I knew that self-love, those roles of self-love are good. So anyway, that happened. Then it happened. Then this lump was gone, and it stayed gone for years. And then it happened at the last holiday season. Our family went through a terrible, stressful time, very tragic difficulty. And at that time, we were under a lot of stress, and my body responded by creating the lump again. So today I was realizing that I could combine that self-love, I could combine it with a little flavor of sexual energy as well. Because sexual energy, as it rises up, if it doesn't get spent, right? If you don't spend it, you can rise it up through your body, you can direct it anywhere. And that as I let the love and the sexual energy come together for that part of my body, that it had, and the reason was I was feeling around to see where it was at, and it was completely gone. And so I was just checking, because I check, right? It came with the holidays, we got rid of it. But every once in a while I go back and I check in on that thing just to make sure that everything is good. And sure enough, everything was good. So I'm sending the love with this little other element with it. And the thing about the sexual energy is it's very blissful. It's very, very uplifting. Really, it's uplifting to the soul. And I realized as I was doing that combination, putting in the impulses of the heart, that sweet, sweet love that comes out of the heart, together with that sweet, very kind of blissful energy, soft, sweet energy that comes with sexual experience. When I put those together, it's like a successful marriage. It's like the great tradition of relationships between two individuals who are dearly in love with each other, that they can put those energies together and get a richer, more complete, more fulfilling quality of consciousness to go into any area. You can apply to any area of life, right? A couple can decide, hey, let's buy a house, right? And then they kind of put their energies together, and they have to go around to decide which one's the best one. And once they get it, they probably need to, fix it up and paint it and things, like all these different things that people do together. that combination, it supports the engagement of the energy that sits between the heart and the second chakra. And this is the other really big point from yesterday, was about power. Because the coupling of energies, romantic energies, gives rise to being able to manifest different things. It's like a technology. It's like a technology that's very, very powerful. I'm telling you, from now on, whenever I do any energy healing work on myself, I'm going to be including both that incredibly soft heart value plus the intense kind of rich sexual energy as well, so that goes in and it fuels and it feeds the body. And that sexual energy is a little more activating of Agni, right? Because Agni is that primordial fire in the body, and the sexual energy has a kind of a fire element to it. So it can go in and it can apply to areas that need great transformation. It's interesting. I wasn't expecting this, you guys, but I keep comparing sexual energy to anger. I keep comparing them. And the reason is that there's certain mechanics that are similar, and it's actually more socially acceptable to do a webinar where we look at anger and we talk about anger and we do healings for anger than it is to do a webinar about sexuality. So, so in our society, right? So as a result, I'm kind of falling back with that thing. But remember what I said about anger earlier, that sometimes these very intense feelings, fear is another one, right? You get frightened and you run. You fight and flight, right? So these more malevolent energies, we can call them, or tamasic energies, that would be another word we could use, give rise to tremendous energy production. The energy like flows up like that and allows us to make a big change. Well, the thing is that the sexual energy is initiated at the second chakra level. Then there's the third chakra, which is the solar plexus, is your power center, right? And then there's the fifth chakra, which is the heart center. Oh, excuse me, fourth. Yes, right, fourth. Sorry, this is the fifth one right there, where the dragon is. So, so between the second and the fourth is the third, and the third is the power center, right? So this is a validation, just the form of our bodies, the fact that our bodies exist. And right now there's healing going back for the ancestors, just telling you guys, and I can't give full description to everything because I'm too busy on this other thread that I'm on with you right now about power. But just know that the ancestors are with us in this part of the healing, and that's some good happening for them as well. But the fact that the body is formed the way it's formed, the fact that the human body has this construction, it's constructed this way, puts the sexual energy here, and then the power right there, and then the heart right above it, like that. And so what happens is when we start moving these two energies together, we coordinate or harmonize them, it causes a big activation of the power center in the middle of the body. Cool. This is me learning along with you. I'm just reading it from what's going with all of you amazing saints and scholars and healers and brilliant beings, siddhas, great, powerful beings of creation that are with me. I'm so grateful. Okay. So it's a technology. It's a technology. We're putting together the sexual energy with the heart energy. And when they come together, it gives us access to a level of power in the center of the body, which is beyond what we have had access to previously. Ties in beautifully, everybody, right? Anybody who was with me last night, ties in beautifully with the healing that we ended yesterday's session. And that healing was for the solar plexus area. It was between the second and third chakras, I think. And there was a huge refinement and strengthening of our physiology at that level. And it makes sense that we need that level of strength in order to take on the big challenges, So that brings me to another point from yesterday, which was interesting and useful, which is that right now, in the web of life. And good that we just did that healing for the web of life, everybody, right? Good that in the web of life, or interesting that it's constructed at this time. It's been shaped, we can say shaped with intention to pick up or draw up sexual energy that radiates off of the human physiology at the time of an orgasm or release, radiates off, and pick up that energy and quarantine it, isolate it, and then channel it into particular areas in our world, particular individuals, particular groups that have figured out that they can exploit the resource of sexual energy that's in the field of our collective to bring it over into just specific camps. And it's interesting that it's not always individuals who have the highest and best interests of everybody in heart or in mind. And so one of the reasons that the collective of humanity has, we consider sexuality taboo. And one of the reasons that we tend to avoid and we tend to think of it as a problem a lot of times, and there's a lot of darkness and challenge around it, and that's going to start bringing me up to some questions here. The reason is that the energy has been misused or misplaced, I would say. We know everything in creation is for a reason. Everything has a value, so we don't want to dwell on that form that's in the web of life as necessarily a bad thing or a problem. It just is what it is. And what's happening is it's reducing access to resources for the bulk of the population, for most people. And so one of the antidotes to that, which was offered last night, was whenever that experience, that sexual release is experienced, it's offered, the energy is intentionally offered back to source. And that way it goes to that fundamental core of all that is created and all that is good and all that is uplifting and evolutionary to life. So if the orgasm occurs and the person just is like, has no connection or attachment to whatever happens with that energy, come what may, then it'll get picked up by bots, so to say. It gets picked up by cosmic bots, and it ends up in another location. But if you offer it back to source, it ends up nurturing your fundamental connection to your own divine nature. That's good when that happens, because one of the things that we're all doing on this human journey is we are embodying divinity more. Every action, every thought, every experience is for the sake of divine being integrating into the material relative level of expression. And all the other non-material relative levels of expression. So offering the energy back to source is what any of us can do individually to keep the beautiful, resourceful energies that we produce in our precious divine physiologies working for the greatest good. It's like deciding to be the postman who gives nice letters. You don't want whatever we're producing, we want that to have a beneficial evolutionary effect. Even we don't want by accident for it to end up in some remote, weird place where something awful will happen with it or something. Okay. It's good for everyone to be in a place to have access. It's good for everyone to have access to the transcendental source of creation, because access to that provides perspective on all sorts of experiences and situations. And what I've noticed is that when people don't have access to the source of creation, there's more of a tendency to be gripped by their experiences. There's more of a tendency to be overshadowed by experiences of the relative. And then it's really easy to get into situations where you make decisions that maybe they appear to be in your highest and best interest, but they're not in everybody's highest and best interest. And as a result, the long-term effect is not good karma, returns on karma that aren't so good. You know, when a person doesn't have that connection with the transcendent, it's much harder to see the subtle connections between action and reaction, because the first action and reaction loops take place down at a very fine level of creation. And if the awareness is up on the surface, one misses those first messages from the creation that, hey, that action isn't the smartest. It's good to appreciate and understand different people's experience. It's so precious, so precious. I know I've said this before, but my father would always say, if you can't be a shining example, you can always be a horrible warning. So, so I know, I love that guy. So, you know, we can learn, we watch others, we learn. It's good to shine the light of our perspective on the challenges of others to, again, uplift those, right? Remember the Energizer Bunny? We're like little Energizer bunnies, shining our light on every situation, on every circumstance, on every thought, and bringing it to its next highest level of expression. And we do that, of course, by taking a dive into the field of silence and letting the source of creation be the initiator and the administrator of that transformation, right? Okay. So here's a question from our question and answer box. All questions will be treated anonymously, of course. Is the sexual energy, the male aspect, in a female sweet energy within each individual? She said the idea of it makes perfect sense to her, that we integrate these polar opposites within us. So yes, we all have both values, and we all choose to balance those two values in a way that suits us best. And how that balance suits each individual is a byproduct. I mentioned this yesterday, but it's good to review it, is a byproduct of the way we portion up our causal bodies. And the way we portion up our causal bodies, for most people, is an unconscious process. However, for those of us who are doing energy healing, we are using our awareness to get down into that causal level. For those who are new to my terms, causal would be the finest level of feeling, the finest manifest level of self. That's the level of self that's like an ocean, right? It's like it's right next to the absolute, which is an infinite, unbounded ocean. And then right next to it, the first level of manifestation, body, is also like an ocean of feeling, an ocean of experience and perception. It's a big ocean. It's as big as the whole universe. And my causal body is as big and same occupying space as your causal body, and the causal body of these trees and these clouds and everything. But it being big, as humans, we tend to get in there and we create these resonance spaces. Some resonance spaces are more specifically one gender or another, and other resonance spaces are more neutral. So we talked last night about how angels tend to have a resonance space that is more gender neutral, whereas like ascended masters tend to be actually more to the extreme, male, very male, and female, very female, like that. So different spaces resonate a kind of a balance between the male-female energies differently. And if one is not aware, if one is not doing the energy work and consciously portioning off those spaces, then what I'm seeing looking into the collective field is the tendency is for individuals to, first of all, we'll tend to adopt patterns from our family, from our parents. That's one thing. A lot of times people will form, it looks like a lot of those resonance, I'm getting a download here, a lot of the resonance spaces tend to form decisions from an early childhood, very early childhood. It's a lovely, innocent time, and it's a time when, particularly the first 18 months, the individual is almost, we could say, more cognizant of the finer realms of creation than the dense material. There's still just learning, like a person's learning to find their feet in the relative field, but they're still well connected in with the heavenly realms, with the finer realms of creation. And so at that time, there's a lot of useful input that comes from the finer aspects of one's own nature. This brings up the topic of guides. I know that's a little bit off of our today's topic, but the idea that, you know, little children are much more cognizant of the guides, and guides are portioned segments of their own causal field. They already decide, the soul decides before it even comes into the human body, like some of the basic construction of that causal field, how they're going to be with it, how they're going to work with it, how they're going to divide it up, and so forth. It's a very kind of complex process, but it's not impossible for us to understand and to utilize for our own highest good and the highest good of all those around us and everyone. Okay. Causal field. So I can't quite remember where that thread started, so please forgive me. But I know I was going to go to some question. Oh, it came from the question, right? It came from the question here. And her idea is sexual energy the male aspect in a female sweet energy within each individual? And yeah, it's, you know, it's colored by the balance, right? You've got the male energy and the female energy, and then they'll take positions where one will become more dominant or the other will become more dominant, like that. And, you know, I was teaching dance for some time, and there's certain moves that can be done very femininely. Like there's a shoulder move that can be a very, very tender feminine move. But in a male physiology, it can be a move of like power, because men have powerful shoulders, right? It's the same move, but it takes on like a different flavor depending on how it's expressed, I guess, or how we choose to express it. And as a teacher, I had to be able to do both, right? I had to be able to find that sweet, soft, feminine value that could do the move just so softly, or I had to be able to find in myself that male energy that could come up like a warrior in battle, like, okay, you know, strong. We have both. We have both. And as beings, we are beyond all of those, right? And this comes back to that point of not being too much gripped by the relative material experience, but having the foundation of transcendental being there constantly to help allow the being, the soul, the indweller of the body, to move fluidly depending on the needs of the situation. Mothers have to be almost like little army sergeants or something sometimes. You have to corral the kids around and get them to do what you want them to do, you know. She's the mom and she's sweet, but she's strong too. Thank you for that beautiful question. Another question. Do you have any comments on committed relationships between more than two people? That is like one woman having two male partners or vice versa, or group relationships, all consensual. That's a really good question. Okay, so my first thing about that is as I said before, I'm not like a super expert on all things sexual, but just from the position of from the angle of energy healing, in my awareness, when I fathom that question, thank you also, such an interesting question. I really appreciate it. When I fathom with my awareness, what I get from that is that we're looking for a combination of ultimately when divinity is more stabilized or integrated, when we're embodying our divine nature to its maximum, that means we're utilizing the physiology's full potential. Okay, so what we're looking at is the energy of the second chakra and the energy of the heart chakra. So the sexual center and the heart center, like that, with the power center in between them. And when we look at that, what we realize is that if we're using just the sexual power, but we're not engaging the heart power at equal value, that's able to refine, and it provides a point of reference that creates just a little bit of tension, that allows the evolutionary process to continue. Remember, I was saying, like, every thought, every word, every bite of food, everything, you can have that experience, you can uplift it to its next level. Well, in order to do that, we need slightly opposing energies that can catch different angles. It's like having two eyes open. We need to have a perspective on something in order to understand it sufficiently to be able to be an active participant in the evolutionary process. So the thing about consensual relationships that are organized just completely around the sexual experience itself without engaging as much the heart value, without engaging it in a way with at least enough equal energy there that you can get that perspective, is that it disallows the full potential of the physiology to be expressed. And I'm not saying it's bad, because I'm not one to judge anyone's actions, for sure. And the other thing is that divine being is doing everything. Divine being is doing all this play. And to whatever degree we're able to incorporate our own divine nature into our experience, that's the degree to which divine being is able to be in that space and work with it. And if it's an area that has a potential problem in it, that's actually all the better for divine being, because it's able to then go into a dark area that it needs to go into. So, and I'm not saying that that's dark, I'm just saying that being is doing everything, therefore we cannot judge. But at the same time, my experience is that, and this is only from my limited experience of being married for 30 years, for whatever that's worth. No, that's actually worth a lot to me, so just saying that's worth a lot. But anyway, from my experience, having a balance between the sexual energy and the heart energy, it causes the two energies to kind of work together through that power center like that and refine themselves, and has ultimately an extremely uplifting and evolutionary effect overall, long-term, long-lasting, for both myself and my husband, for everybody, for the family, for everybody. The energies have this uplifting and evolutionary effect. So it's not to say that a person shouldn't explore their lustful feelings, because that's bliss. There's bliss in that. And if you don't know it, then you need to know it. But I'm not saying in those situations, for example, that the heart value isn't there. But I'm wondering, I'm considering, if, say, take the first example, a woman has two partners, how much she's able to give to each one, right? If you have one partner, you can completely give for that one partner. But if you have two partners, then each one gets 50%, or you split it up some other way, 80-20 or 60-40 or whatever. But what that means is that the heart value, whatever, say you divide it up 60-40, okay? That means that the heart value is able to evolve 60% here, and then the other 40% evolves in a different manner over here, which isn't necessarily completely harmonious. It's not fully integrated. It's not fully integrated with the 60%. 60-40, and they're not fully integrated. So there is going to be development of the heart there, but will the development be as soft as it needs to be, or as integrated as it needs to be, in order to allow divinity to fully manifest? And the answer, I do not have that answer. I do not have that answer. We don't know. The fact that there are situations and relationships like that happening in our world means that there are people that are exploring that question. And it could be different for different people, or they could be coming up with their own technologies of consciousness to allow themselves to navigate that particular landscape in a way that's going to be maximally evolutionary for everyone. I don't know. I know for myself, there is this value of being with the same partner in the long term that allows the love to go deeper and 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 deeper. And so that's, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. For me, this lifetime, thank you, God. Again, that flow of love and gratitude, because it's nice to have that experience. And it's a very traditional experience. A lot of the traditions are there because they're lasting longer. There's an old saying from the Vedas, that which is closest to the truth lasts the longest. So there are reasons for the traditional relationships. And it's not something that you can explain to anybody, because you have to actually experience it in order to understand it. It's like parenthood, best kept secret in the world. You don't, I mean, it's just, you can't explain to people how much a parent loves their child. It's just so precious. Okay, dear Dorothy, can we make world healing for abuse of children's sexual energies by negative forces? Yes, so that is not possible anymore. Thank you for that question. That was actually one of the points that I wanted to look at today. So I appreciate that, because I definitely feel that this, there are, unfortunately, and that ties into another question here, which I'd like to bring up. And this one is, what keeps, I love the way this lady worded the question so delicately. She said, what keeps coming up for her when we're talking about corruption is that we currently have a president, who's accused of several times of sexual abuse. So he is reflecting collective consciousness to bring this out to heal. Yes. So yes, I don't follow the politics too heavily. And I don't like to use our energy healing webinars as a platform to get political, of course. And I'm not judging anybody, but I definitely feel that at this time, more light of consciousness is shining everywhere through all of us and through our big collective and through our healing collective. The light of awareness is shining more. And as it does that, it's able to go into areas that were previously camouflaged. They were consciously previously camouflaged. My son yesterday showed me a video of one of the candidates for president, and it's like a 5 or 10 minute video showing him touching little girls in creepy ways. And I was like, oh, that just is too bad when that happens. So anyway, the idea of creepy is kind of an interpretation, right? Like maybe all those clips were taken out of context, so we don't really know. I don't know. But that's out there, guys. Yeah.
Healing for child abuse.
Yeah, healing for child abuse. And also, I would say sexual abuse in general is good. And it's also what we're doing now, and I think it's a good time. The question's coming up now. It's a good time that because of the strength that we've created in our physiologies, particularly in the third chakra, between the sexual energy center and the heart center, because of this strength, we're able to, as a collective, and I'm seeing the same thing happening that happened last time, we're preparing to do this healing. Our collective is concentrating in. There's some kind of, it's like when water turns to ice, maybe that's not a good example. When carbon turns into a diamond, the molecules have to get more orderly. So something like that is happening in our healing collective, that there's a kind of a orderliness which is increasing in our healing collective, and with that, purity, sattva is increasing. And I'm seeing our healing collective like radiant with so much light right now. It's as if our whole healing collective, as I look out at our healing collective, I see everybody's energy, and it's like a tapestry, right? Everybody's different, everybody's energy is a little different colors and flavors. But as our healing collective starts to center in to do this healing, it's like the tapestry gets lighter. The whole tapestry is getting lighter and smoothing out. Not so much varying texture, but like the Roman legions, like the Roman armies. One of the reasons they were so scary fierce is that they marched in orderly lines, whereas a lot of the guys they were fighting were kind of, haphazardly scattered about. So it's the same thing. We're kind of coming in like that. The other thing that's happening is the activation of the types of feelings that we have when when we think, as a mother, for heaven's sake, as I think about how I feel about those events of the past and those events of the present, the abuse situations that are taking place. The darker feelings that are connected to and associated with them, I'm seeing them processing in the gut area right now, in the second chakra area. And remember last night, I mentioned that one of the reasons that the sexual energy is being able to be sort of siphoned out of the collective field and brought into places where it can be utilized by lower intentions, we could say lower intentions for humanity, is because it gets corrupted. And when it gets corrupted with darker energy, and I think that's what we're processing right now. We're processing in the gut. And so I just want to make sure that everybody is in the space of wholeness, that there's actually kind of energetic protection around our collective, so that we have our causal field, our causal bodies are upgrading and promoting a structure. It looks like a very beautiful, very stable energy structure that runs from the causal level. Here we go with our diagram from gross to subtle. Causal level and astral level, these two levels here. It looks like the structure is actually building up in the astral field, which is where the web of life is, which is good. So we're doing it. So we're building this structure, and we are like construction workers building the pyramids or something, building a big structure. And this big, beautiful structure has a fractaline nature. So the threads of the the threads of the astral field are organizing up into a kind of sacred geometrical form that is, the form is able to be present at very, very fine dimensions and then also at larger dimensions like that. So that makes it super, super stable. So it's a kind of matrix. We're creating a matrix. Okay. See, as I'm reading this along with you, it's like I see it, but vague, and then I see it clearer like that. The matrix. Oh, this is the thing that we were kind of aiming at last night, right at the end of our healing session, was how can we do a healing that allows everyone's sexual energy, when it releases in a release, to go back to source. How can we do that? And this matrix is part of the web of life. I'm just looking at it. It seems to be the light from our energy healing center seems to be flashing out into the web of life, but it's flashing out more like bolts of lightning than it is like a radiant light that's touching everybody and everything. One of the hindrances here is that there is karma. There is karma connected to and associated with abuse and abuse of children. And I may have mentioned this in the past, but just to briefly review, what happens is there's so many ways to transcend. And some of the ways to transcend have more dominance of tamasic energy, or kind of the dark, dank type of energy, malevolent type of energy. And so that includes experiences of child abuse, because when children are sexually molested or abused, it causes them to escape any way they can. And because they can't escape physically, they escape on the level of their consciousness. They'll step back. And it's a very common, and I work with lots of people who've had different types of trauma when they were little, and it's really common for people who've been sexually molested to say, when I was being sexually molested, I felt as if I was standing back from the experience, looking at it from the outside. So, and it's not to say that an out-of-body experience is the same as transcending. It's not. But there is a particular element in there of consciousness expanding out past the physicality of the body. And so it's like using a drug, like using a hallucinogenic drug. Hallucinogenic drugs do not make you transcend, but they do create some little bit of loosening up of the grip of the relative on the self. So there's some little aspect of that that comes in. And sometimes souls are so deeply desiring a quick fix for lack of spiritual integrity, that they're willing to have an experience like that shifts the direction of, it'll shift their whole life, especially if it's as a child, it'll shift their whole life to move in a more spiritual direction, because they had that time when they were like out of themselves and they felt safe, like they can see the little body there being abused, but they're kind of like safe because they're standing out away from it like that. We live in such an interesting, complex universe, right? So there are all kinds of experiences that people have. So children will sometimes choose that in order to elicit an experience which is in the direction of a spiritual experience. It creates some expansion, limited, but some expansion of consciousness. And, for centuries past, in the Western world where we didn't have transcending, that's about as good as it gets. It's unfortunate, but and a lot of people were abused. And other ways too. I mean, just physically abused, children beaten and things like that. That's why it comes up. So what has to happen really, when I look at that on the big picture, is the access to transcending experience needs to be available to everybody. Because as long as it's not available, and as long as a soul feels that it is not and will not ever be available, then a soul is likely to choose that experience. They're likely to select it in order to get themselves moving in the right direction. And what can you do if a soul chooses it, and then nature brings somebody about to be the other side of that experience? And it's not saying that it's right. It's not saying that the abuser's in the right. And it's not saying if we try to get rid of the abusers, then just other abusers will come. So really, I think to get into the seed or the source of that thing, we have to get down to the real problem is souls seeking the transcendent, souls seeking their divine source, seeking union with divinity. That's the real problem. So the real question here is, if we're going to try to heal this for the whole world, we have to heal the problem of people needing to transcend. And it feels like it's too big. It feels like it's too big.
What this matrix?
Yeah, well, the matrix is good. And the matrix supports the ability to find the transcendent in every point of experience. Oh, good point. He says, what about the matrix? Yeah, if we're able to find the transcendent in every point of experience, and already yesterday, as we were working with this energy, it was or maybe it was today earlier, it was going out and creating a kind of a softness in the web of life. And that softness, what I see happening in the web of life is the softness is bringing or eliciting more sattvic responses from the environment. So that's good, because if a person, say a soul, a little tiny, unexperienced soul, deeply desires transcendental experience, they're very spiritual, they want to have that experience, and they put that impulse out to the creation. I want to have the experience of connecting with my maker, with the divine. I want to connect with the divinity. Then, depending on how much sattva is in the web of life, could bring that experience to them through something like the arts. Could bring them some beautiful, exalted experience of, say, their parents take them to a concert and they listen to some exquisitely beautiful music and it gives them a transcendental experience or something like that. I mean, even if they don't have a technology, right? Those who have the technologies of transcending, kudos to you, but most people don't. So we're dealing with a world where most people don't. So the softening is something that we can do in our healing collective. So let's ask being with our collective and with this matrix that we've created, is there a way to extend the softness that goes into the web of life and uplifts it aligns the web of life in our field, in our human collective, more with divine nature, so that the web of life, when a person has an impulse, I would like to be more spiritual in my life, that nature brings them an experience that allows that in a more sattvic manner, in a sweeter, softer, gentler, more compassionate, more graceful manner. And the answer coming back is, I'm feeling like a big energy upgrade within our healing collective. And I'm also feeling in there the sweetness of the heart value connected. I'm actually seeing, remember last night when we were going through the lineup of the chakras, and I'm saying some of them are more organizing power and others are more applied value like that. So every other chakra is like that. It's kind of like it's like a breath or an in and out stroke. They rotate in different directions. That the second, fourth, and sixth chakra are working together. In our physiologies, integration is occurring. More light is pouring into our energy center and the center of our healing collective. And from the center of our healing collective, there's a beautiful energy building. Beautiful, and it's very, very soft, and it's very, very controlled. It's very refined. This energy, it's a complete or whole energy, because it has 3 legs, not just 2. It's got the leg of the energy of the second and the fourth and the sixth chakra all together. And that energy, as it grows and builds with such regularity, consistency, I'm seeing it as if put through a filter that allows it to be very clean, very pure sattva energy coming through. And I'm getting chills all up and down my neck too, and up into my head. But what it's doing is we're creating a kind of a channel through our healing collective that allows the pure energy of divine being to move through our healing collective and into the web of life, into the field around us in a much more powerful way than it did earlier in this session.
Is that more mother divine?
Yeah. Oh, is it more mother divine-ish feminine energy? That's a good question. It looks to me like almost like pure sattva. That's what it looks like. It just looks like this extremely bright, brilliant light, blazing light, white, hot, level white light, which is a combination. It actually looks pretty balanced to me. My dear friend who asked that question looks gender neutral to me, has gender neutral qualities. So soft, though. It's creating such incredible softness and sweetness. And it's like, it's beyond forgiveness, you know, for all. I mean, that's part of the story of healing sexual exploitation is 2 sides of the coin, both sides need to be healed, right? So, but it's beyond the forgiveness that goes in with that. It's really just such a great, I would say a great supporting effect to help the collective of our world find connection, each individual through their own spiritual journey, find their connection to source. And find it in a way which is non-damaging. Find it in a way which is uplifting, is healthy, is helpful, is whole. It helps them and it helps those around them, all that we love. We're at our time. We've got all these more questions here and here. How do you work on healing sexual trauma that is generational, pass on from mother and grandmother, as well as sexual trauma from my own life? So this, I'm thinking, but you can have many children. That doesn't mean you're giving your children unequal heart love. Oh, that's a good point. Oh, here's a mommy saying, you know, you can have, why can't you have many sexual partners? Because you can have many children and give them 100%. But here's the interesting thing about children. Mothers give about 15% of their Shakti to their children. So once you have a child, about 15% of your being is no longer yours, it's for the child. But what's really interesting, what I'm seeing, especially since I've got adult children now, is that they got different portions of my Shakti. So each one grew up with different aspects of that energy that it became their gifts. And they have evolved into such incredibly different people. So that's my answer. That was, I could give a quick answer on that one. As for the one about passed on generationally, we need to do healings for the ancestors for that. Here's another: sex and sexuality has a stigma, confusing, and is affecting her marriage. Right. So the stigma and the difficulty that's connected to the sexuality is a byproduct of the fact that our sexual energies have been misused at a collective level. So that's what the healing, a lot of the healings that we were doing today was for that. That when the sexual energy is able to be more contained in the body and you have more autonomy over where your sexual energy goes and what you do with it and exactly how it affects you, then it ends up being more of a force to support the evolutionary process. And when the evolutionary process is more integrated in the relationship, that supports the marriage being better. It supports it being better. I know that's a quick and dirty answer. Please forgive me, because we're basically out of time and I was wanting to connect with everybody. I think I got through pretty much all the questions. As for the lady with the generational situation, ancestral healing, ancestral healing, ancestral healing. That's what I have to say about that. And I've got a lot of that's free on my website. So maybe, hopefully, some of my free offerings, or I should say the person who asked that question, some of my free offerings can be helpful on that account. Or also it's something that we can go into more deeply on future webinars. Thank you everyone for joining me. So incredible to have you all with me. It's a big group today, by the way. So thanks everyone for being with me. It was a very interesting, very exciting ride that we had through today's journey. I am so grateful to all of you because literally it does not happen without you. I am learning by your side as we're going along. I just happen to be talking at the same time, jawing at the same time, but thank you all for being with me. I'm so grateful, and our next webinar will be in 3 weeks, and unfortunately I don't have the title in front of me, so I'm not sure what it is, but we'll keep thinking. If anybody has cool ideas and titles for these webinars, shoot them my way, and we will do more. Thank you. Bye.